It was February of 2020, right before the world shut down for the pandemic, when I lived through one of the most terrifying days of my life. At the time, I was a junior in high school, and that morning started like any other. The only unusual thing was that our math teacher was out sick, and we had a substitute. The substitute was nice enough, but she was new to our school and didn't really know the routines. That meant the class wasn't taking her seriously. People were talking, joking around, and only half listening. For a while, it felt like an easy period. Then, halfway through the class, the intercom clicked on. "Attention, lockdown, lock all doors immediately. This is not a drill." At first, everyone laughed. We thought it was a mistake, maybe some glitch or even a prank. A couple of kids clapped sarcastically saying, "Oh no, we're all gonna die." But the moment the substitute's hand started to shake as she rushed to the door and locked it, the joking stopped. Her face had gone pale, and her voice cracked as she whispered, "Everyone to the corner." Now that was when it hit us. This wasn't a drill. We crowded into the back corner of the room, trying to stay out of sight from the windows. The substitute killed the lights, and the room instantly felt like a cave. Too quiet, too tense. I could hear every little sound. Someone's breathing, the hum of the overhead projector shutting off, the faint thud of shoes scuffing the floor as people shifted nervously. Then came the first sound that made my stomach drop. Screams from the hallway. Not playful screams. Not the kind you hear when kids mess around between classes. These were real, sharp, panicked, desperate. The kind of screams that make the hair on your arms stand straight up. We all froze. No one moved. Some of us looked at the substitute, expecting her to tell us what was happening, but she just shook her head. She didn't know either. Then came the pounding on the door. "Please, let me in, please!" It was a voice, a boy's voice, shouting, crying, banging his fists against the locked door. The substitute stood in the dark, frozen in place. I could see her silhouette, stiff as a statue, her hands trembling at her sides. She whispered so softly I barely caught it. "What do I do?" The training said never to open the door. Never, no matter what. It could be a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if it really was just a scared student stuck in the hall? The pounding grew louder, more frantic. The boy's voice cracked with fear as he begged again. "Please let me in. Please." No one spoke. No one moved. We just sat there in the dark, listening, our hearts racing. I was gripping the sleeve of my hoodie so hard my knuckles hurt. The substitute pressed her hands over her mouth as if holding back sobs. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The hallway went silent. No more banging, no more screaming. Just silence. The minutes crawled by. Some kids quietly cried into their arms. Others held hands, too afraid to let go. I remember checking my phone, but there was no signal. Too many people in the building were trying to text at once. My mom had messaged, "Are you safe? What's happening?" But I couldn't answer. We sat there like that for nearly an hour, every sound outside making us jump. At one point we thought we heard footsteps, slow and heavy, moving past our room. Another time, there was a muffled sound, like a door slamming shut somewhere in the distance. Every noise made my pulse pound harder. Finally, the intercom crackled again. This time it was the principal's voice, tight and unsteady. "Students and staff, the building is secure. Remain in lockdown until law enforcement arrives at your door." Not long after, 2 police officers knocked softly, announced themselves, and unlocked the door. They guided us out in a single-file line, hands raised slightly so they could see we weren't a threat. The hallway looked like a war zone. Backpacks and binders were scattered across the floor, lockers stood open, and papers littered the ground like confetti. Kids from other classrooms had tear-streaked faces, some still sobbing as they walked past armed officers. We eventually learned the cause. Someone reported seeing a masked man near the back entrance of the school carrying what looked like a weapon. The building went into full lockdown as police swept every hall and classroom. In the end, they never found a gun. No one was arrested. The officials told us it may have been a false alarm. But here's the part that still chills me. The person outside our door, the one pounding and begging to be let in, was supposedly a freshman who'd been stuck in the hallway. Except when police swept the building, he wasn't there. None of the officers saw him. None of the nearby teachers had let him in. And when roll call was taken later, no one was marked missing. To this day, no one knows if it really was a student outside our classroom, or someone else entirely. In 2016, I was a sophomore in high school, and one ordinary Tuesday morning turned into something I'll never forget. It was around 10:30 a.m., and I was in the library working on a history project. The room was quiet, filled with the soft hum of computers and the sound of pages turning. The librarian sat at her desk, sipping coffee and sorting through papers. Then the phone rang. She answered casually at first, but I watched the color drain from her face as she listened. Her eyes widened, and when she hung up, she didn't say a word. She stood abruptly, walked to the light switch, and snapped it off. The library sank into shadow. Then she locked the doors and whispered, just loud enough for us to hear, "Lockdown. Hide." Now the tone of her voice made my stomach twist. We'd done lockdown drills before, but this felt different. She wasn't calm. She wasn't rehearsed. She was terrified. There were about 15 of us in the library that morning. Chairs scraped quietly as we dropped to the floor, crawling between bookshelves and crouching behind furniture. I slid into the farthest corner I could find, heart racing, trying to make myself invisible. For a few minutes there was nothing but silence. I could hear my own breathing, shaky and uneven, and the faint rustle of other students trying to get comfortable in their hiding spots. Every sound felt too loud, too dangerous. Then we heard it. Running footsteps in the hallway. They were fast, pounding against the linoleum floor, echoing through the building. Then came a crash, something metal slamming to the ground. It didn't sound like a book or a locker. It sounded heavier, sharper, like a pipe or maybe even a weapon. The noise made several students flinch, covering their mouths to stop themselves from gasping. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the silence was worse than the noise. And then came a voice. "Hello? I know you're in there." It wasn't over the intercom. It was right outside the library doors. Every muscle in my body froze. My throat tightened, and I bit my lip to stop myself from making a sound. The voice was calm, almost playful, but it sent chills down my spine. Whoever it was, student, teacher, or stranger, they knew exactly where we were hiding. The door handle jiggled once, then again, slowly, testing it. The locked door rattled softly in the frame. A girl 2 rows down from me started to cry quietly, burying her face in her arms. Another student mouthed, "Shh," over and over, his eyes wide with fear. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the handle went still. We sat in paralyzing silence for what felt like forever. Nobody dared to move, not even to whisper. The air felt heavy, thick with tension. I counted the seconds in my head, but they stretched into minutes. Somewhere across the room, a boy started muttering a prayer under his breath. Another student clutched their phone, shaking, though there was no signal. Everyone in the building must have been trying to text at once. 40 minutes crawled by like that. Every creak of the building made us jump. The silence outside the door was suffocating, but the thought of someone still standing there, waiting, was worse. Finally, the sound of boots echoed through the hall. The library door unlocked and 2 police officers stepped inside with rifles raised. "Everyone out," one of them ordered. "Single file, stay low." We emerged from our hiding spots, legs stiff, faces pale. Some students were still crying, clinging to their friends as we shuffled out. The hallway looked like a scene from a nightmare, papers scattered, backpacks abandoned, doors flung open where officers had cleared classrooms. Later, the truth came out. The whole thing had been a swatting call. Someone outside the school had reported a supposed gunman, tricking law enforcement into responding. No weapon was ever found. There had never been an intruder. But here's the part that still haunts me, the part none of us can explain. The librarian swore she had never called for us to hide out loud. She said she only whispered directly to the students closest to her, and even then, only once. There's no way anyone in the hallway could have heard. Yet somehow that voice outside the library door knew. "Hello? I know you're in there." Those words still echo in my head. Fake threat or not, that voice was real. And to this day, no one knows who it belonged to. It was October of 2019 when I experienced the scariest day of my life. I was a junior in high school, sitting in my third period history class. It was just another boring Tuesday, until the intercom crackled with an announcement that froze the entire room. "Attention students and staff, we are going into immediate lockdown. This is not a drill." At first, I didn't really process it. We'd practiced lockdown drills dozens of times, and usually they gave us a heads up in advance, but the tone in the principal's voice was different, low, serious, almost shaking. My teacher's face went pale. Without a word, she rushed to the door, turned the lock, and shut off the lights. She motioned for us to move quickly into the corner of the room, away from the windows. The sudden silence was terrifying. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the sound of a pencil dropping on the floor, and even the shallow breaths of my classmates. No one dared to ask questions, but we all exchanged the same look. Is there someone in the school? Minutes dragged by. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a text from my mom. "Are you okay? What's happening?" She already knew something was wrong. Rumors spread faster than anything. That's when we heard it. A loud bang in the hallway. It sounded like a locker slamming, or maybe a door being kicked. A few kids gasped, and one girl started quietly crying. My teacher put her finger to her lips, tears welling in her own eyes. We sat there, listening. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Slow, deliberate. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. My heart pounded so loud I swore it would give us away. The footsteps stopped right outside our classroom door. The handle rattled. Everyone froze. I remember gripping the sleeve of the kid next to me so hard my knuckles hurt. The door didn't open. Thank God it was locked. But then we heard a low knock. Just 3 times. Calm, almost mocking. Whoever it was didn't say anything. They just stood there. The silence was unbearable. Then the footsteps moved on, fading down the hall. We stayed crouched in the dark for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 25 minutes. Every sound, the creak of the building, a cough from the back of the room, made me think the person was coming back. Finally, the intercom came on again. The principal's voice was strained, but steady. "Students and staff, law enforcement has secured the building. Please remain in lockdown until officers come to your door." Relief washed over us, but the fear didn't go away. When the police finally unlocked our door and told us to evacuate in single file, I'll never forget what I saw. The hallway was lined with officers, rifles drawn. Backpacks and binders were scattered everywhere, like kids had just dropped everything and ran. Later, we learned that someone had called the police claiming there was an armed individual in the building. No shots were fired, and no weapon was ever found. Some say it was a prank, others think it was a real threat that never played out. The school never gave us the full story, but what I'll never forget is that knock on the door. That deliberate, slow knock. Police said no officer was near our hallway at that time. To this day, none of us know who it was. It's been years since then, but every time I hear the words, "lockdown drill," my chest tightens, and I can still hear it. 3 slow knocks on the door.